Hi, I'm David Broadbent and welcome to this week's episode of the Chaddy. Every week we sit down with someone who has an association with Oldham Athletic Football Club. It could be a former player, manager, owner, board member, or in this case, journalist in this week's episode. We talk about their time with Latics, their good memories, their bad memories, the characters that they came across during the time at the club, and we put your questions to them as well. I would like to first of all thank our sponsors. We have AC Tyres, NFL Weekends, and Eden Creative, who very generously sponsor this podcast and allow it to happen. You can follow them all on social media. AC Tyres on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AC Tyres. NFL Weekends on the same platforms at the same at NFL Weekends. And Eden Creative at Eden Creative UK. Thanks to all of them for their support. And also to Luke, who pulls all this together because, quite frankly, I am incapable. Less said about that, the better. So moving on to this week's guest, as I mentioned earlier, a journalist who spent 8 years covering Oldham Athletic. He followed them around the country for the Oldham Chronicle. He worked under 10 different managers. I've counted it up as. I'm sure he'll tell me if that's wrong. It's great to have him with us. He covered us from 2009 to 2017. A very warm welcome to the Chaddy Enders, Matt Chambers. Matt, thanks very much for joining us. How are you? What are you up to these days now you're not in football?
I'm out of the journalist game altogether. Really, I've moved into the wonderful world of public relations. So instead of being the person who writes the stories and puts them in the newspapers, I'm the person who rings up the journalists, asking them to get things into the publications. So it's been a bit of a change, but I'm really enjoying what I'm doing at the minute. So even though I'm even this strange situation where everything is done like this through a screen.
And do you miss football?
I missed the cut and thrust of football reporting. I really enjoyed doing it for 8 years, and especially working at a club like Oldham Athletic, where when you're working as a local reporter at a lower league club, I think you get a bit close to everything, close to the players, close to the staff, and close to the managers as well. And it's just interesting to see how a football club operates up close and personal. And obviously that leads on to really kind of getting invested in the club emotionally and wanting them to do well. And you'll look back at those 8 years and there weren't any promotions, there weren't really any danger of getting the playoffs. A couple of sort of cup runs and flirtations with the Johnson's Paint Trophy. But even though the finishes were all 17th, 18th, and lower than that, there was always something going on at Oldham. Always something interesting to report on. Always some scandal. And as a journalist, that was brilliant to be involved in, even if it wasn't so great for a lot of people working at the club at the time.
How did you put the Cron covering Latics?
Well, I started the Cron in 2006, late 2006, and I joined to take over from Roger Halstead, who was the rugby league reporter extraordinaire. And I got that job, and I sort of shadowed Roger for a good month, sort of learning the ropes off him. And there was nobody better to learn the ropes off than Roger, because he was a brilliant reporter and a brilliant guy as well. Still is a brilliant guy. So I covered Oldham Rugby League for 4 years, and then unfortunately the Cron, there were a few redundancies. In fact, pretty much since I started the Cron, there were always redundancies in the offing because of the way the local papers were struggling even back then. It came to be that I was an opportunity to cover Latics, and did I want to do it? And I sort of jumped at the chance. So in 2009, first game was Brighton away, I think. Took the plane from Manchester to Gatwick and covered that game. That was the first one, and did it for 8 years, up to August 2017. Then did it a little while for the Manchester Evening News as well, and sort of that lasted until the end of 2017.
So 2009, first manager Dave Penny, then, yeah.
Dave Penny was the first manager, yeah. Interesting really, because he never really. I mean, he was a perfectly nice bloke, Dave Penny. Very personable. But the fans never really took to him. The football wasn't great, and I think coming in after sort of Joe Royal and the John Sheridan era, which was kind of good football and popular people, It was always in a bit of hiding to nothing, trying to rebuild the team. But as I said, the football wasn't great. I remember one story kind of like sums it up. I mean, at press conferences, he wasn't particularly forthcoming, or you couldn't really get great stories out of his quotes sometimes. And I remember Gordon was taking the press conference, and he used to write his program notes from the press conference, what the manager said at the press conference. But definitely, he decided one week that he wanted to write it himself. So Gordon was a bit like, oh, okay, no problem with that, And anyway, he came back into the boardroom where the press conference was held with a piece of A4 paper, and he held it up. Give it to Gordon, and Gordon held it up, and there was about 50, 100 words written on there, and Gordon's face was like, what can I do with this, basically? But some of that weekend's program was like, his program notes were the shortest ever, but spaced out massively to try and fill the page up. It was like in libraries you get those books for the sort of partially cited. It was like one of those kind of things. But so yeah, it was difficult for him because, like I said, the fans didn't take to him, and I don't think he was as savvy with the media as a lot of the managers were that I worked with. And that one time when he said in a post-match press conference, I don't give the monkeys what the fans think, and that was kind of like that. It just kind of stuck with him to the end. That you can't. As soon as you get the fans offside, like David Dunn was quite similar, really. Then your time's limited, I think.
So, how did a typical week look? So there would always be a press conference on a Thursday before a Saturday game. From your point of view, how would a typical week covering Latics look?
Yeah, so I guess you start off with the pre-match press conference on a Thursday. That used to take place Thursday mornings at Boundary Park in the boardroom, and you would have the written press there. So usually myself, sometimes the Manchester Evening News, Mike Keegan used to come along. Then you'd occasionally get radio down there as well, doing Radio Manchester interviews. So you get all your information there. There's stuff on camera for the club website, and then after that you go off the camera and you get some extra bits as well, trying to get some exclusives out of the managers and players. And then you go away, you do your previews on a Friday. You obviously cover the matches on a Saturday, which might entail a long trip to Plymouth or Bournemouth or somewhere. And cover the matches. Later years report on the matches live, so you'd produce a live report at the end of the game, then get back home, write it up for Monday's paper, and then during the week, obviously we had 5 back page pieces to fill during the week, and on a Wednesday we would have a double spread of Latics inside as well, so it's like interviews and various features and just whatever you can get hold of, really. And then you're back into it again. And obviously you've got a Tuesday night game as well, which, most seasons are pretty packed with Tuesday night games as well. So that just adds to it. And it's just non-stop. I mean, you have a day off on a Tuesday or Wednesday, but even on days off, things happen. And I think it's like the role of a local journalist is your phone. So something's always happening on Twitter, or someone's got a story that you want to get hold of. And it's a pretty full-on job. But yeah, as I say, it was a great 8 years that I spent doing it. It was great fun.
So how do you strike the balance? So I guess if we get beat 4-0 on a Saturday, you can't candy coat that. You've got to write there and say that was rubbish. So how do you sort of balance the relationship between saying it how it is, but maintaining the relationships with the players and the managers that you still need to deal with on a sort of daily or weekly basis?
Yeah, I think someone described it as being a local football reporter's job as being like a critical friend. So if someone comes on a night out with some atrocious gear on, you're the one to tell them that's not the way to go, kind of thing. You've got to be honest. You've got to be truthful, but at the same time, like you say, you can't afford to burn any bridges as well. So I think the main thing is just to be, like I say, just to be straightforward and honest. I mean, and if you see a performance that you didn't think was good enough, or you saw certain players that weren't really doing the business, or even sometimes if you think the manager could have made a difference by making a substitution here or a different formation, as long as you feel yourself you can justify what you're writing, And I think to my mind, you were okay going ahead and saying that. Not that a lot of managers and players would agree with some of the stuff I put in, which is completely fair enough. But I always felt that I always quite enjoyed it when a manager pulled me up on stuff. Not because I enjoyed a battle, but just because I prefer that relationship where it's someone could say to me that was a load of rubbish that you just wrote there, rather than someone sort of storing up resentment and then unleashing it all in a tirade at the end of the season or something. I'd rather have a relationship where things got back to you quickly and you just kind of ironed out the differences and agreed to disagree or whatever and moved on.
And were there any particular players or managers that did sort of take offence at anything you put in?
Just going back to Dave Penny, and when he left the club, which was late towards the end of the 2009-2010 season, and Martin Gray took over. I think I wrote a piece basically saying that in a lot more words than this, but just saying that it wasn't, his stint at the club didn't seem to be really an enjoyable experience for anybody, least of all kind of like I don't think Dave really took to the club and the fans didn't take to him. And I've said it in so many words, that it wasn't really an enjoyable experience for anyone. And anyway, the Martin Gray took over the last game of the season and he made a point at the end of the game going around the press room, and there were quite a few press back then. And he shook everyone by the hand and wished everyone a happy summer and see you again next year, blah blah blah, and got to me and said, "Well, not you. You're a disgrace." And I was like, "Oh, okay, then fair enough." Because I had to go at his mate, and he was backing his mate up, which is kind of kind of fair enough, I guess. But I would prefer it if it wasn't done in such a public way. But he felt that I was out of order, so there you go. But there'd been plenty of behind closed doors rollickings as well from the managers that I got on with really well as well.
And sort of media team at the time, obviously, sadly, Gordon no longer with us, but some real characters off the pitch in the media team, the likes of Gordon, Roy, Tony Bugby, and then when Luke came in and people like that. So kind of characters to work with at the club.
Yeah, definitely. And I was never part of the car journeys down to these various places on the Tuesday night.
Think yourself lucky. Roy drove me a few times, and how I'm still here to tell the tale is no idea.
Well, apparently Roy doesn't drive anymore, so that's probably maybe a good thing. I don't know, but good set of characters. Alan Howarth as well, the photographer. Like you say, Luke Ingram. There was some great characters and Gordy in particular. And one thing about Gordy that I don't think ever really got as much attention really was as it probably should have done, was that he was a really good commentator as well. I'd sit next to him at some away grounds and listening a little bit while he's doing his commentary, and not as a trained commentator, but it really flowed. I mean, he might get the wrong players every now and again, but it didn't really matter. He gave a really good flavour and impression of what was really happening out there, and Roy was there to give add a bit of colour as a Latics fan as well. So they were for all the kind of like fun and games and joviality around the away trips, particularly. They were good at. I think they were good at what they did as well, and that's worth mentioning.
I've got to say, I always filled in for Gordon commentating a few times, and he gave me one piece of advice, and that piece of advice was, if you don't know who the player is, no one else can see, just say a name, and as long as he doesn't score, you've not got a problem. I think that from what you said there, I think he very much advice that he practiced. But certainly Gordy massively missed. Leaves a big hole at the club. So moving on from Dave Penny and Martin Gray, next in the hot seat was Paul Dickov, and someone a little bit different. He came with a higher profile, but his first manager's job. So how did you get on with Paul?
Yeah, great. I thought it was he's a great bloke, is Dickie, and it was a bit of a shock that he got the job, a bit of a shock that he took the job, really. But he knew Simon Corney personally, and he threw himself into it, I think. And I remember at the start, and it was it was all really positive when he took over, because the football was pretty good. I remember going to Tranmere and winning at Tranmere on the opening day. And I also remember the Notts County victory at home. I think it's 2 or 3-0, and that was again in Dickoff's early days, and I think Craig Shaw was manager at Notts County, and he came out to the game and said, "Yeah, we made Oldham look like Real Madrid." And then you've got T-shirts with the Galactic Obs across it, and it all kind of snowballed. He was good with the media, he was good with the fans, and he had to play the game, and he got his team playing some decent stuff. So it was kind of a bit of a breath of fresh air, really. And it's a shame how it turned out in the end, but he had some fantastic moments as Latics manager.
You mentioned that he had a relationship with Simon Corney. He was obviously club chairman over the period of time you were there. What was your relationship like with Simon?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I got on alright with Simon. Simon was fine when he answered his phone. It was difficult to get hold of at times, but and I think we the Chronicle wasn't always his friend. He felt like we were a little bit getting at the club, and that he was trying to do his best to get things sorted out, and we weren't really helping with stuff like stories like we're just being late and what have you. And as you mentioned before, it's kind of like you're trying to tread the line between giving the fans the information that they need about the truth about the club, but you also don't want to hurt the club. And I think Simon felt sometimes that we were, on the wrong side of that line. But yeah, I think most staff would say that Simon was a decent bloke. Maybe some people might not agree with that, but when the Chrome went bump in 2017, one of the first people to ring me up was Simon, and to commiserate. So yeah, I've not got too much to say against Simon. To be fair, yeah, he was always all right with us.
Yeah, I mean, so I obviously worked for the club under Simon, and I always got on very well with him. So Paul Dickoff goes next in the hot seat for a short period of time. Tony Philliskirk. Now, I guess from knowing Tony and being around the club for years, that Tony is a bit of a press dream.
Oh yeah, he can talk and he can talk and talk. Yeah, but I think with Tony, with the job that he did with the youth team, he was more or less. Sorry, the most important thing to say was that he was good with people. He was good with young kids, and I think a lot of kids who came into that system at Latics grew up a lot under Tony and learned a lot about life as well as football. It was obviously he was a decent coach, and if you look at all the players that Latics brought through when he was there, and the millions of pounds they generated for the club, and you've got to say that overall he did a good job bringing people through and bringing players through for the first team. And we always got on well with him. He always talked really well. I just think it's a shame that he never got a chance to properly stake his claim at taking the Latics job, or if he did come along, the opportunity it wasn't perhaps at the right time for him, because it would have been interesting to see how he got on. I think yeah, he did talk the talk, but I think when it came down to it, he was quite tough as well. And I think he would have been. I think even when he was in caretaker charge, he was quite strict with players, and some players fell foul of that. As I say, it would have been really interesting to see how he would have got on as a first team manager. But I guess maybe we'll find out now.
Yeah, true. Probably not Oldham anyway.
Yeah.
So next through, another manager sort of making his first stake at the job. And I must admit, I saw him at the club kind of a couple of weeks before he signed, and he was in the players' lounge. And I just assumed we were bringing him in as a player because I think he was only sort of 32, 33 at the time, and that's Lee Johnson. I think was he the youngest manager in the league at the time? I think he was there or thereabouts, and probably another surprise appointment.
Yeah, name completely out of left field when he became clear that he was going to be announced as manager. Yeah, but he was really somebody who was schooled in it. I mean, literally, obviously his dad was a manager, and he came in a little bit like Paul Dickoff, but even Paul Dickoff to the next level in being prepared with everything, prepared with he knew all the players, he knew all the players he wanted to get. He compiled a massive dossier on Latics. He knew exactly how to treat everyone, including from the staff right through to the media as well. And you could clearly see that he had a lot of media training, and he was great with it with those guys. He'd slip us a line every now and again for an exclusive. He'd give good decent quotes out, and he was always available to speak to. So he was a bit of a dream really to have as a manager.
And during Lee's time, an incident that was might well be the biggest sort of controversy during your time at the club, the near signing of Ched Evans. What do you remember about that whole sort of time?
Yeah, it was very difficult, really. There were two main controversies when I was there. Obviously, Ched Evans was the big one, and the other one was Darren Kelly and an old tweet I think about Martin McGuinness, and that caused a lot of controversy as well. But yeah, the Ched Evans one was the main one, and it was difficult for us as a newspaper really because we had so many people. I think it just divided everyone. Right down the middle, you had people who said he's done his time, he deserves a chance to go and earn his living. There are other people saying football needs to take a stand here. Someone needs to say this is not right. He shouldn't be playing. And as a newspaper, we had advertisers telling us, if you come down one way or the other on this issue, we won't advertise with you anymore. So it became like a real kind of like commercial issue for us as well. And I remember as a reporter, obviously it's a great story to be working on. But at the same time, you kind of like treading on eggshells because you don't want to upset the advertisers, you don't want to upset anybody who's invested in this story, and you've got to always try and be impartial and give both sides of the account when you're being interviewed. And there were a lot of interviews. I mean, I remember turning up to when the story about first broke. I was asked to go to Boundary Park car park at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning to do a live Radio 5 live interview. That was the first one that I did. But after that, there was TV requests. There were, even like kind of like tiny radio station in Ireland would ring the Chronicle up and ask you for your view on it. You're like, why are you doing this? But everybody wanted to know the latest, and it was difficult to get anything really that was new. I think Simon Corney was in America at the time, and he was kind of a little bit dislocated from what was actually going on at the club, and that was another problem really because there wasn't, I think a lot of people wondering what they should do. I mean, there was I don't know if that actually happened, but there were stories of staff members nipping out to Tesco for sandwiches and coming back and realised they'd been followed by reporters, in case they'd been off for a meeting with one of the Chaddy representatives or something. So it got really intense for even club staff. It was a pretty, it was a big story, but it was quite a scary time for people as well, I think. But as a reporter, it was a pretty big story to get your teeth into. So it was very memorable anyway.
And to say, I mean, I'd left the club about 2 or 3 months before, and just turning Sky Sports News on and just sort of seeing everyone sort of camped at Oldham. It's like, so I'd been there during the times where we beat Liverpool in the cup and got the draw with Everton, and they'd been live on live TV. But this was something else. And I still had a lot of friends at the club, and I messaged them every day saying, "Oh, how are you? What's going on?" They were like, "Oh, it's just relentless." No one had ever seen anything of the like before at the club. So I guess for someone working on one of the local papers, it must have been something completely different for you than a normal Tuesday night trip to Bristol Rovers.
It definitely was, yeah. I also remember the being a part of the line of reporters who stood outside Boundary Park and watching the traffic warden come down and ticket all the cars who parked the no parking zone and make an absolute fortune. But yeah, it was an interesting time. I remember the day when I think Latics decided to pull out of the attempt to sign Ched Evans as well was the only time, well, maybe not the only time ever, but the only time I can think of when the Chronicle printed 2 editions. So the first edition had gone out in the morning originally as planned, and then we produced another edition at sort of midday-ish to say that Evans hadn't signed, and we had to rewrite the back page and redesign inside as well. So yeah, it was a big day for the paper and a big day for the town really as well.
Yeah, and then not long after that, I mean, that kind of Lee Johnson, kind of, you always got the feeling that he was looking for what he would consider bigger and better. And when he left, obviously, go to Barnsley, and Dean Holden comes in. Now, I know Dean, I've known him for quite some time, and one of the nicest guys in football, Dean Holden. Was he like that to work with?
Yeah, it was great, and also I don't think people appreciate like Dean's a smart guy, and he's well schooled in football. He's interested in psychology of football and everything around it. And the more you talk to him, the more you realise why he ended up as manager of Bristol City. To be quite honest, I think he was unlucky at Latics in the way. He had a lot of injuries, and I remember one game, I can't remember who it was against now, but he was playing Connor Brown on the right wing, which I'm sure even Connor Brown would say is not not his position, but it was kind of a case of needs must really. And it didn't happen for Dean, just like it didn't happen for an awful lot of managers. It's not an easy job. But as far as getting on with him, yeah, it was great.
You touched on the next manager a little bit earlier. Another controversial appointment, if you will, Darren Kelly. Again, I wasn't at the club at the time, but Darren, from what I can tell, very much kind of split opinion from his social media past to his coaching. I believe that as many people really liked Darren as really didn't.
Yeah. I always got feedback from people who worked with him on the pitch that he was a really good coach. And I got feedback from people in the boardroom at Latics at the time who said that he gave the best interview. I think one person said, if you were in the room, you'd have given him the job. His interview was that good. But yeah, it was a massive shock that he got it. It was a massive shock that he got it at his age and with his level of experience. And I think whether rightly or wrongly, I think people, in the hierarchy of the club felt they made a mistake pretty early. I mean, I'm talking even before a ball was kicked that season, which was pretty shocking, really. But yeah, it didn't go great. Didn't go great for him, unfortunately. I felt like I got on all right with him. He was pretty easygoing guy, and yeah, it just didn't work out. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a. I guess they felt that they got they went a bit left field with Lee Johnson, and hopefully we can work the same magic again. But it didn't work out.
And I guess if Darren Kelly's appointment was a massive surprise, his replacement was absolutely no shock whatsoever, given that he'd been brought into the club a few weeks earlier as a player. David Dunn getting in again, first crack in management.
Yeah, and like you say, it wasn't. I think it was kind of well thought. I wouldn't say well known, but well thought by supporters that David Dunn was next in line, if Darren Kelly did get the boot, and that's how it worked out in the end. And again, going back to Dave Penny when he made his comment about supporters, I think it was the Crew game away when Latics didn't play very well, and I wasn't actually at that game, but he wasn't really happy with the way the fans reacted, and I think he felt it. He felt it was a really difficult job, and that people didn't understand the difference between Latics as Latics were when they were successful and Latics as they were when he was in charge, and that people were a little bit obsessed by the past and the need to sort of get real. So yeah, I think he rubbed people up the wrong way a little bit with those comments, but it was his first job, and people get emotional after matches and they say things perhaps they sometimes perhaps maybe shouldn't say, but. Yeah, felt like I got on well with David as well. He was a good guy. Again, always available to talk to, and looked after us pretty well as a newspaper. So yeah, no qualms about David Dunn for us on a professional level. Yeah.
After David started struggling, so in comes John Sheridan. Shez, of course, David Dunn, Darren Kelly. They'd not had a massive amount of experience. Shez came in with absolutely bucket loads of experience to very much steady the ship on the pitch. Yeah,
Shez the troubleshooter, wasn't he? And he did it twice. And yeah, someone that everyone knew at the club, and everyone knew exactly what they were going to get, which was a little bit different to what had gone before when they were sort of plunging into the unknown. And yeah, Shez is Shez. There's nothing hidden about him. He gets on with it. He knows what he wants out of players. And he lets players know what he wants out of players as well from the touchline. Not shy in barking a few orders out. And yeah, it was good. He was very much old school in the way he would interact with the press, and he'd do his press conferences, and he'd say what he felt, and that was it. There wasn't really much. As was evident with sort of Lee Johnson and his ilk, there wasn't really much media training involved. It was just, this is what I think. Go away and write it if you want. If you don't, no skin off my nose. But yeah, it was fine, straightforward, and yeah, pretty good to deal with, really.
So moving on again, we're going through a lot of managers that you've dealt with
There were
here.
a lot of managers, yeah. There were a lot of managers.
Next up, Stephen Robinson, who, again, it was pretty early on in his managerial career. He's gone on to do okay, but again, for whatever reason, didn't massively work out at Oldham.
Yeah, I think again he was another one who came in with a good pedigree in terms of his UEFA Pro license. Again, a highly rated coach and showed that on the training ground from what I've heard. But I mean, he was left with such a massive task when he took over, and in like creating an entire squad from scratch. Basically, I think Crofty will tell you, but I think when they went back for that pre-season, if I think I'm right in saying there was only like about 4 or 5 first team pros, and so Steve Robinson had to sort of build a squad from nothing, and try and get them playing on the pitch, and it never really worked because couldn't score goals. Just couldn't score goals, and that was the main issue. No matter how they tried to change things up, it just wasn't really happening for whatever reason on the pitch in terms of managing to score. But yeah, I mean, Robbo was a really, really good guy. I really like working with him, and I think it's just a shame how that one worked out. Really, it was just always a difficult job, and it just petered out.
You aren't the only person to say that. There are people that I know from the time at the club that were both players and staff that all sort of say that he was dealt the worst hand, and he was probably a better coach and manager than his time at Oldham showed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a fair comment.
And the final manager that you dealt with, again, following a pattern, very early in his first job, Richie Owens. How was Richie for you?
Well, I remember interviewing Richie when he was a player. He came back to Latics very briefly on loan for the second or third time. Anyway, and I remember speaking to him on the phone, and usually when you interview players, or sometimes when you interview players, you get like stock responses like, yeah, I agree with that question, or yeah, blah blah blah. But Richie was like, I remember asking him, I can't remember what I asked him, but I said something, and he went, no, I don't agree with that at all. And your ears immediately go, whoa, okay. And then he gave a long, detailed explanation as to why. And you immediately think that's someone who definitely knows his own mind. That's someone who sounds like he wants to go into coaching, and eventually it happened at Latics. Again, he came. I guess you don't get a manager's job usually unless there's something gone wrong. But he came in when it was difficult time, and he turned it around, almost instantly. I remember going to, I think it might have been his second game in charge or third game in charge down at Portsmouth away, and Latics played some of the best football I've ever seen from a Latics team in my 8 years, and managed to beat Portsmouth, I think 2-1 in the end, but just absolutely played them off the pitch. And I thought, this is a team that's really going places. And for one reason or another, it went badly wrong, and Latics ended up being relegated. But I think there were definitely off the pitch issues that season. Players being brought into training who the manager had never seen before, and that kind of all the off-field shenanigans it doesn't help. It's not an excuse really for getting relegated, but it doesn't help. Doesn't help.
So when did you stop covering Latics then? Because after the Cron, you mentioned that you went to do a bit for the MEN. So when did you stop covering the club?
It was towards the end of 2017. So I did the Cron finished at the end of August 2017, and then I did a bit of freelance work after that until December. I think my last game was away at Gillingham. I can't remember the score. But since then I've done a few games on a sort of freelance basis. So I'm there now and again. I was there this season for the Tranmere home game, which is not the one you wanted to pick because it was a terrible game. But yeah, I've been back now and again since then. But end of 2017 was my last proper season, as it were.
So kind of just before the new regime took over then?
Kind of on the cusp of them taking over, yes. They were around the club, and you'd see them at away games, around the dressing room. But yeah, we didn't really, they were bringing players in, but they weren't officially in charge.
Yes, people like so you just sort of just about covering Queens of Meneague's time at the club.
Yeah, that's right. I remember. I think Tess was in charge at the time, and and it was one pretty much presser that on one Thursday morning. And I remember Quincy Manning being rumoured to be signing, at least. I don't remember if he'd officially signed. And the press conference is like half over, and one of the coaching staff pokes their head around the door and says, "Have you seen this lad we're about to sign? And have you seen this video of him?" And it was Quincy Manning missing from about 3 yards out, an open goal in Dutch League. You think, what to say that was. But yeah, I think Shares, he was like, I think Johnny Placide, I asked him a question about Johnny Placide signing, and he basically shrugged, he didn't shrug his shoulders, but he might as well have. And he went, yeah, I just didn't know what was going on, really. That was a shame.
Yeah. So that's all the managers that you've worked with. At various different times, you've had players doing columns for the paper as well. Who did you have involved doing that?
We had Robbie Simpson did one for a season. We had Paul Rahubka did one as well. And we also had Crofty did one as well. Crofty, yeah. I think he was the last one, Crofty. And before that, we did Jerry Taggart, who was pretty good. And Jerry Taggart's kind of a media personality now, and he's on always doing sort of commentaries or co-commentaries and punditry. So it must have kind of worked out well for him. But yeah, no, we enjoyed doing that. It was kind of like a bit of we tried to make a bit of an insight into the day-to-day life of Latics players and staff.
Mate, at that sort of time, you could have just sat in Nando's and met them all.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Yeah, just kind of eavesdropped. Yeah.
So let's look back at some of your more memorable games. So you were obviously at the club covering the likes of Forest away, Liverpool at home, Everton at home. Are there any games that sort of really stand out for you?
Out of those three, it's not the Liverpool game that really sticks out. I guess that's one you might expect, and it was probably obviously the best result. But the Forest away was kind of like, it was just so unexpected to see that result, especially at half time when Forest had played Latics off the pitch and you just couldn't see any way back for Latics at all. And then Jose Baxter started doing his thing. Robbie Simpson had a 10 minutes like he's never had in his life, I don't think, and looked like he was going to score with every touch. And it wasn't just that, it was the crowd behind the goal as well, because the 4,000 Latics fans there or whatever going absolutely crazy with every attack. And at the end of the game, I remember Simon Corney hugging Paul Dickoff into the dressing room and Dickoff saying, "Will you give me a new contract?" And it was just a really fun day. And then obviously the Liverpool happened and that was fantastic. But the Everton equaliser, that sticks in mind as well. Dean Bazana's going up and doing his starfish jump, and then Matt Smith piling in. And I mean, that season, the Matt Smith story was extraordinary, because I remember him missing an open goal against Crewe, and there was talk of him going out on loan to Macclesfield. And a few weeks later, he's in the back page of every newspaper in the country, and his career just completely flipped on its head just by him absolutely monstering Seb Coates in the Liverpool game and kind of ruining his career. It was just an amazing. That cup run was just an amazing time to be around. It was really cool.
One of the other games that must have taken a lot of rewrites was the Peterborough 5-4 as well.
The Peterborough 5-4, yeah, another one where Latics were out at half time, and I think Tomlin made it. I might be wrong here, but I think it was 3-0 at half time. I could be wrong. Lee Tomlin swept one in to make it 3-0, and the crowd are on their back, and you just think, this could be a bit messy, this. And then all of a sudden the second half happened, and Gary Harkin started getting on the ball and doing his thing on the left wing, and David Worrell scored, and then Kasunga pops up to make it 5-4. I remember as well at the end, I think Darren Ferguson was rumoured to have attended his resignation as well. But I don't think it was proven, but it was that kind of like just a mental madcap, just on paper, an absolutely ordinary run of the mill League One game, and then you just suddenly get something extraordinary like that. It was really bizarre.
I was at full time. I was doing the stadium announcing that game. I was still in the tunnel at full time, and I've never seen a manager look as angry as Darren Ferguson did at that point. And it was all. See, at that point, you had a youth team that would go and play games in the morning, and then at full time, they'd all be in the tunnel to do all the sweeping up or anything. And I've never seen a group of young lads trying not to laugh as much in my life. as Darren
Yeah,
walking in the tunnel that day. It was ridiculous.
yeah. I'd have had the big coats and that. Yeah, but yeah.
So, couple of questions that have been asked. One by Mike Keegan. So Mike, that I was he's asked two questions. The first was, do you remember having to buy him a curry in Bradford because you lost a bet about Oldham winning at Bradford?
I do remember it, but to be fair, I took him to the best curry house in Bradford, so he should be very, very, very grateful for that fact. On Manningham Lane, yeah, sweet centre downstairs, absolutely banging curry. But yeah, that was it was difficult. It was a difficult day as a Bradford City fan. That was a tough one, but he enjoyed his curry. That's the main thing.
And he does ask a fairly serious question, and one that you're probably pretty well placed to answer now that you're sort of out of it. In terms of the role of the local press, how do you think, especially in and around Oldham, that over the last 3 years and what's been going on at the club, the role of the local press that hasn't really existed, how do you think it'd been different in your time with holding the club to account? So, like a lot of things that have happened at the club in the last 2 or 3 years, when you were at the Cron, forget the back page, it'd have been front page, page 2, page 3. How do you think the role of the sort of local press has changed over the last couple of years, especially in and around Oldham?
Yeah, I mean, the demise of the Cron, it goes without saying that's had an impact. Not just on football, really. I don't think it's bigger than football. It's local democracy, in general, and I think the local paper's a vital part of the community, and to lose it, from the football side of it, it's definitely not good. But I think it is wider than that. But going back to what you said, I think I'd like to think that there would have been a little more scrutiny in terms of holding the club to account. It's difficult these days because club media kind of rules in these lower league clubs, because there's the local news organisations or the national news organisations that run the local papers don't have the resources or the will to set a reporter on the particular beat of a local club. So these things kind of, until they pop up in the nationals, like Mike Keegan or whoever, the Athletic did one as well, I think. They occasionally take some interest and put some information out there. But on a day-to-day basis of what's happening with the late wages being paid late, or players getting fired off into the youth team and what have you, things like that, it's left to fans to kind of like, find out through well-informed other fans, if you like, rather than getting the information from a newspaper. I still think things do still get out, but probably not quite as overtly as they would do if there was somebody working, on the club on a daily basis, which is it's a shame, but that's unfortunately the way it's gone. But I would also say on the flip side as well, I don't think it's all doom and gloom, because something like this, like a podcast, for example, that you wouldn't have got 20 years ago. So you can say the news element isn't as strong, but everything around the club, I think, there's podcasts, there's the fan. I think fans have got the means of production now, and they can produce their own take on Latics and their own version of events. And I think that is a positive thing as well. So it's not all doom and gloom.
Good stuff. Other questions that have been sent in. So, who was, during your time covering Latics, who was the best player you saw in a Latics shirt?
The best player or my favourite player? The best player, I think, was Jose Baxter. Okay, well, Jose Baxter would say was the best player, because he did things that that other players just couldn't do. He saw passes that other players didn't see, and he was just talented. He was just ridiculously talented, and I think it's a real shame that his career kind of like didn't really go to the places it should have gone to. But yeah, Baxter for me was probably the best I saw in my 8 years. In terms of favourite players, go back to a name I've already mentioned, probably Gary Harkins, because he's just a proper throwback winger who looked like he'd just been pulled out of the crowd. Didn't really like chasing back or defending. It's not that he wouldn't do it, it's just that he didn't really. You could tell he didn't enjoy it like some players pretend to do. And yeah, just a little bit of magic about him, a little bit of something a bit different and something special that made him stand out from the rest. Because sometimes in League One, players can be much of a muchness, can't they? They all kind of wear the same haircuts and do the same things on the pitch. But Harkins was a bit different, and I quite enjoyed watching for that.
So in terms of maybe some of the stories that perhaps didn't get out when you were covering the club, who was the sort of the loosest cannon at the club as far as you knew? Anything that players that you would hear stories about and think, oh dear.
Joseph Baxter was Joseph Baxter was one. I've had a few stories that it'd be great to get on here, but yeah, I can't. George Green's another. George Green, yeah, came from I think was it Bradford and Everton. And had a difficult life, and again talented, but didn't really happen for him in football. And unfortunately, things got on top. So he was a little bit of a loose cannon. Who else? Jacob Mellis, maybe he was one. Dean Bazanis, maybe. Again, it's hard to say. You don't want to go into too much detail. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I'll leave it at
that. So obviously you go there every week for a press conference. There must have been players that you would be delighted would be put up for the interviews, and players that you would think, oh, this is going to be hard work. So who were the players that you would look forward to interviewing the most, and who were the players that perhaps you'd look at and think, you don't enjoy doing this? Why have you been put up for press?
Yeah, I mean, luckily for me, when all the what they used to be called the French lads came in, they struggled a little bit with interviews. But I used, when I was there, it wasn't really so much. There weren't really so many foreign players. You struggled with the language anyway. So yeah, there were some good ones. Let me think. Crofty was always decent for a quote. Dean Furman was very articulate, and very kind of sensible and happy to deal with the media, and a really good captain. Matt Smith again, very smart lad, a good talker. And I think he kind of enjoyed it. Enjoyed being a part of being a footballer. If he thought the media was kind of added ingredient to the whole special thing for him, because he wasn't wasn't brought up in the game, was he? He came from non-league, and I think he kind of relished everything to do with that. Who else? I can't even think of any bad ones at the minute. Chris Taylor was always really good. I mean, I don't know if that surprised anyone, but Chris Taylor was a really, really good talker, quite interesting, and always had something quite insightful to say, rather than the platitudes that you sometimes get with players. He was another really good one. I think the goalkeepers tend to be pretty good as well. For some reason, goalkeepers always tend to be quite philosophical, and even though you have to be a bit crazy to be a goalkeeper, they were always a little bit more kind of more philosophical, more grounded about things, and they were interesting people to talk to as well.
Okay, cool. So we've covered sort of what your favourite games were, like Forest away and what have you. The worst game you ever covered as an Oldham reporter?
The worst game? Gosh, they don't tend to stand in the memory of the worst ones, do they? I think there was a home game against Tranmere, and was it on a Dave Penny? It might have been on Dave Penny. It was nil. Yeah, I think it was. It was 0-0 at home. And sometimes when you're a reporter at the game and you're typing up your notes, and you think, I don't know what I'm going to write about here. And then you got to the Tranmere game, we got to like the 60th minute, I'm thinking, I've literally got nothing written down. I don't know how I'm going to produce a report on this match. It's just a turgid League One match where the ball was flying everywhere, and nothing was coming off, and a proper 0-0. That one probably sticks in the memory. And also Stockport away in the same season. And Stockport were really struggling. They were bottom of the league by miles, and they were having to bring in loan players all over the place, and they were really, really struggling. But Latics just kind of like got brought down to their level, and it was just an awful game to watch. I think Latics ended up winning the match, but the fans weren't happy, and they get some stick even though they won. And that was another one that sticks out as being pretty awful to have to watch. There were a few, to be fair, but those two.
In terms of the stories that you wrote on the club, what are kind of your proudest ones, the ones that you look back on now and think, oh yeah, really, really enjoyed that, or really, that was a really good story?
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of it around Ched Evans was pretty. I mean, it was an intense period, but you were throwing yourself into the story and trying to getting some decent copy out from around that situation. What else? Let me think. Some of the I like some of the kind of offbeat kind of quirky ones were quite interesting as well. I remember doing one back page piece about Sabutia, and it was all taken from when Lee Johnson was in charge. And after the press conference, we noticed there was a Sabutio table in the back, and said, why is a Sabutio table in the boardroom?" And then he explained, "Well, it's because we've got the players and we're teaching them positions on the pitch, blah blah blah. But please don't take the piss out of it." So we took the piss out of it, and so I mocked up a back page with Sabutio players on the back, and we explained what it was about rather than just being completely comic about it. I did feel slightly bad about that, but it was quite a fun story to write anyway. But yeah, there were always stories about Latics. There was stories of wages being late, stories of players signing, stories of the new chairman coming in, which was another one that was pretty good. Yeah, there were quite a few.
Of all the managers you've worked with, who was your favourite?
I'll probably say Lee Johnson. I think Lee Johnson, because he just knew how to play it with the media. And I remember once I think Mike Keegan did a story when he managed to invite himself on the team bus down to Gillingham, I think, which for the MEM was great, but for us it was a bit annoying. It was like, oh, how did he get that? But Johnson recognised it straight away, and so he said to us, "Look, I realise that Mike's got that story as an exclusive. So for you guys, why don't you come on the Christmas party to Manchester City Centre to the Christmas markets?" So we went along with that one and got a couple of stories. What? Sorry.
That was brave of him.
Yeah. No. Well, it was like I was told to be by his side, so I didn't see too much. But it was during the day as well, so I don't think nothing too bad went on, even though it was the day off. But yeah, he recognised that he wanted to be fair. He'd slip you the odd exclusive about a player or an injury, and yeah, he was just really good to deal with. A good talker, and there was always something going on as well. And the football was pretty good, so you didn't have to write too much bad stuff about him to get you called into his office.
And the final question that I've got for you, looking back at all your time at the club, if you had to pick a favourite memory of your time with Oldham, what would it be?
Right, I'm going to be controversial here. My favourite memory of time at Oldham was definitely Meadow Lane, 20, and it was 0-0. It was the most boring game you've ever seen in your life, but I was there with my laptop catching up on the score of Bradford City at Aston Villa in the second leg of the League Cup semi-final. And when James Hansen scored the header to take Bradford City to Wembley, I was the most overjoyed I've ever been at a Latics match. And I was so overjoyed that after the game, I was walking around in a daze trying to find my car, and I couldn't find my car for love nor money. I was an hour outside Meadow Lane wandering around trying to find my red Porsche. Eventually did find it. It was a lorry had blocked off the view of it, but I didn't care. It was a brilliant night.
Excellent. And Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to join us and to look back at your time covering the club. Massively appreciated. And thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem at all. It was good to bring back some memories, so thank you.
A huge thank you to Matt Chambers for taking the time to look back at his time covering Latics and joining us this week on the Chaddy Enders. Thank you to each and every one of you for watching or listening this week. It's massively appreciated. You can follow us on Twitter or Facebook at the Chaddy Enders. If you want to submit any questions, any suggestions for guests, anything like that, please do. More than happy to hear them. A huge thanks also to our sponsors, Eden Creative, AC Tyres and NFL Weekends, and also to Luke for editing and bringing all this together, because quite frankly, if he didn't, it wouldn't be put out anywhere, or it would, but it might be in like Russian or Chinese or something. Thank you once again for tuning in. Massively appreciated. And we'll be back with more next week. Thank you very much.